on Voyager, we sent some messages and some information about ourselves, such that if an intelligent species, beings, intelligent civilization were to pick Voyager up, that we would have for them between sounds and the language of science, if you will, that they kind of get a sense of where we are and who we are. 115 images just showing all the beautiful stuff on our planet. They sent a recording with natural sounds, surf, wind, thunder, animal sounds. They sent musical selections that covered the whole range of history. Thankfully, there wasn't rap yet. And it also contained a letter. It actually contained a letter from then President Jimmy Carter, as well as a letter from the President of the United Nations. I just want to read an excerpt from the letter that was from Jimmy Carter. This is a present from a small, distant world, a token of our sounds, our science, our images, our music, our thoughts, and our feelings. We are attempting to survive our time so we may live into yours. We hope someday, having solved the problems we face, to join a community of galactic civilizations. This record represents our hope and our determination and our goodwill in a vast and awesome universe. 1977. Now, it's interesting because here's what that record did not include. Besides rap, it also did not include images of violence and war and hate and famine, military parades with weapons of mass destruction, hate, racism. Now, all of those things were also going on in our world. But that is not the image that we wanted to present. We chose to show the best of who we are. We chose to tell that story. So this month, the CSL Global Vision theme is kinship with all life. And it has to do with the idea that we are connected with each other, with all creation, with the universe itself. I don't remember who said it, but we are all made of God's stuff. We are all made of stardust. I've heard that one too, which basically says that we are made from the very essence and matter of everything that's in the universe. This week's statement is taken from the Global Vision, and it said, "We see a world in which we live, move, and grow as one global family that respects and honors the interconnectedness of all life." In 1943, Ernest Holmes wrote, "Never think that you can live disconnected from that which is life. If you wish to call this conscious union with life religion, well and good, for it is the essence of every religion. If you wish to call conscious union with the wholeness of things spirituality, well and good, for it is the very essence, of spirituality." So the truth is that we are one. We are connected all the time. I look forward to the days as I continue to walk my spiritual journey to be able to interconnect from the consciousness of my oneness all the time. Because I know that sometimes I feel separate. I feel like I've been separated, that I'm alone and a fluke in the universe, and that's a lie. Separation can never be true. It's just a story that we tell ourselves. Now, what I've found in my life is that you can take events and circumstances and you can organize them to tell more than one story. And that the story that you choose, the way that you connect the dots, is a direct reflection of what you believe to be true. For example, what do you believe about God? What do you believe about life? So let's talk about challenges, shall we? Now, there are some that will say that which does not kill us makes us stronger. Mr. Nietzsche, thank you for that. Personally, for me, I do not find that particularly comforting. Oh, and there's the one, God is putting me through this to test my faith. I divorced that God. That God, I fired him. Big Daddy in the sky, thank you for playing. That is not a story that supports me or creates a space in me to feel really good about God. So that's one story, and some of the very fundamentalist Christian teachings are all about the God that tests us and tries us and all of that fun stuff. And so when we go through difficulties in our lives, and we all do, then you got two stories at least that you can tell. You can tell the story that you are being tested, that you are steel that is being forged in the flames. Things that talk about the nobility of suffering. Now, is it true that there are experiences that quicken us? Yes, of course. Is it true that putting metal into a flame helps create what it is? Sure. Does that mean that in order for us to be our highest and best self, our perfect expression of life, does it mean that we have to go through all kinds of difficult, painful, challenging stuff in our lives? I do not believe that that is true. In fact, Ernest Holmes says that I believe that the world has learned everything it needs to from suffering. And I love that statement because it just affirms what I believe to be true about life and about God, is that we are not meant to live a life of suffering. That doesn't mean that difficult and challenging things don't happen. They do. It doesn't mean that we can experience profound pain. Doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that it is not necessary for our growth. So it's not the more you suffer, the better person you are. That's not the story. So here's another story that you can tell. When things come into our lives that are difficult, painful, and challenging, I'm always reminded of the Apostle Paul, and I'm just going to paraphrase this, because essentially what he says is, nothing comes into our lives that we're not equipped to handle. And I don't think it's a big secret anymore that I went through cancer. And the fact that when I received that diagnosis, nobody wants to hear that word. And I promise you that I encountered and had to face some of my worst fears and beliefs. But in the back of my head, always, was that God doesn't put things in our lives. Nothing comes into my life that I am not equipped to handle. So at some level, I have had and continue to have everything I need to walk through this experience. Now, some people will say that a challenge is an opportunity to grow. Okay, I can see where that's coming from. The challenge that I have with that statement implies that I have to suffer in order to grow. I don't believe that that's true. However, what I do believe is that when we are put in a challenging situation, it creates an opportunity to look at something in a different way. And that when we do that, we get to have a different experience of life, and that can be very powerful. And then the third thing is that not only do I have everything I need to move through whatever challenge or difficulty that is in front of me, I also know that there is a power for good greater than I am, and I can use it. There is a power for good that is greater than any human condition or experience, and that power is always closer than my breath and is there to support me as I move through my journey. Whether it be a path on a nice level path on a sunny day or a steep rocky incline in the pouring rain, I can always lean upon a power that provides everything that I need to weather the storm and continue on the journey. So here are two different stories that when a challenge comes into our lives, we can tell two stories. We can say that we are being tried and tested, or we can say that we are equipped to move through this. We can choose to be a victim, or we can choose to be a victor. Both stories fit the events. We get to choose what story we want to tell. We are always one, we are always connected, and anything that looks or feels like separation is simply a story that we are telling ourselves that it is not true. Now, there was a father who had 4 sons. They must have been teenagers because they were fighting all the time. You know, the one-upsmanship and all of that stuff that happens with teenage boys. And he was frankly getting, pretty tired of it, really. And so one day he brought in a bundle of sticks. And he said, okay, the one that can break this bundle of sticks is the strongest one here. And so, of course, the oldest one get up there and said, yeah, that's right, I'm bad. And he tries and he tries and he tries and he can't break it. So then the other one says, haha, watch me. And he gets up there and, nope, ain't breaking it. Third one gets up there. Same thing. He tries with brute strength and he puts it on his feet and he does everything. He tries to create leverage. He does everything. Doesn't break it. So the 4th son comes up and he unties the bundle and he breaks 1 stick at a time. Okay, so there are 2 stories that you can tell about this. The first story that you can tell is divide and conquer. If you want to defeat, you divide them up and you kill them one by one. Not a very loving story. The other story that you can tell is that the whole is greater than the sum of all of its parts. The whole is greater than all of the sum of its parts. Okay, which story do you like? There is a story in Buddhism. It's a canon, and it's a beautiful visual metaphor. And it goes like this. In the palace of Indra which is the Buddhist God who symbolizes the natural forces that protect and nurture life. There is an enormous net. And at each knot in the net is a brilliant stone. And so when the net is cast all together, each jewel reflects the other jewels around it, and that together they create a magnificent aura, a magnificent light. So it is with us. We can choose to live our lives as staunch individualists, I don't need nobody or nothing, or we can choose to see ourselves as integral threads in an enormous, beautiful, magnificent tapestry of life, not only on this earth, but throughout all creation. Once upon a time, long, long ago, science and spirituality, science and religion were considered to be absolute separate entities. Never the twain shall meet. And they both had to come up with a theology, a mythology about creation. The scientists developed a theory that did not require any divine intervention. It didn't recognize that there was a greater architect, a greater power that was creating. It was just simply a matter of mathematical and scientific progression. Meanwhile, those who were deeply steeped in religious traditions came up with various mythologies about creation that all had to do with some type of divine impetus. And it's kind of cool to look at all the different stories. And what was interesting to me as I looked at many of them is that at some level or another, there was a reference to an event that kind of sounds to me like the Big Bang. Other names, other occurrences, but that there was an explosion of life. Now, starting in the 20th century, science and spirituality started moving closer and closer together. And as I have said many times, that when I picked up The Science of Mind, in that first couple of sentences it says, we look forward to the day when science and religion will walk hand in hand from the seen to the unseen. At that point I was hooked, because I always knew there was a connection. And here was a man who said, there is a connection, it is the truth about life, and they do not disagree with one another. So the story that was conceived hundreds of years ago, that science and spirituality are like oil and water, they can never mix, that was the story that was being told then. We are always one, we are always connected, and any story about separation is just that. It's a story that we tell ourselves to support whatever belief system that we have. And I know that as my life has progressed, I can look at the various events in my life, and sometimes at the time, I was telling a story that says, life's not fair. And isn't it interesting that I went through a period of time where I was absolutely convinced of that. I affirmed it, and guess what? Life kept showing up as being unfair. As I continued to move on the journey, and sometimes it's weeks, months, even years, before you can have a bigger perspective, I can now look at that same event, and rather than telling a story about how I got screwed over by the universe, I can tell a story that this is the best, worst thing that ever happened to me because it impelled me to look at something different. And in fact, it was that event that was about being passed over for a promotion, I've told this story before, that rocked my belief system and propelled me, albeit kicking and screaming, into my first Science of Mind center. And as the story is told so many times, I walked into a Science of Mind center and I felt like I was at home. For all the time I have been in this movement, I've heard that story time and time and time again, of walking into a center that teaches the principles of religious science and just feeling like I was hearing truth for the first time. I don't know if you've heard of Neil deGrasse Tyson, but he is like the cool scientist these days. And he says, we are part of this universe. We are in this universe. But perhaps more important than both of these facts is that the universe is in us. That is the truth. We are one with all life and all creation, and that anything we deem as being separate is a story that we are telling ourselves. So at any given juncture of anything that's going on in your life, there is always more than one story that you can tell about it. And the choice is yours. Are you going to tell a story of oneness and connection, of being part of something greater than you are? Or are you going to play small in life and be a little victim that life is doing unto you? I know a lot of people who tell that story, don't you? It's not the truth. It's a story that they're telling themselves to keep them small. And even more so, if you get to the root of it all, it's a story that they tell so that they don't have to accept any responsibility for what's going on in their life. It's not my fault. I didn't do it. It was done to me. They, the ubiquitous they, did something, and I'm just a poor little victim. I've been in that place. I've been in victimhood. I'm guessing I'm not alone in that. And all it took to move me to a different place is to choose to tell a different story. We are all one. We are all connected with each other, with life, and with all creation. What I believe is true is that love is the glue that makes that connection. That love, seeing through the lens of love, embodying the power of love, which I believe is the power that holds the planets in their orbits and the sea within its bounds. That when we embody that and we accept that is a reality about life, even though we may not completely understand how it works, we can look at life differently. Can you imagine what it would be like if some of the countries and the peoples that are mad at each other and have been mad at each other for thousands of years, that rather than looking at us and them, they looked at we? Then rather than carrying forward seeming wrongdoings from thousands of years ago, we say, boy, I'm so done with that. I'm tired of carrying that baggage. I'm done. Can you imagine what the world would be like? Each one of us can tell that story of looking and seeing connection rather than looking at seeing separation. One of my favorite, I've got lots of favorite Ernest Holmes sayings from the Sermon on the Sea. That there shall rise up a people that are for something and against nothing. What if everybody wins? What's with this I win, you lose stuff? Okay, that's on the football field or the basketball court or the soccer field or the pool table. Whatever that is, okay, that's fine. But in life, we can all be winners if we choose to tell that story. If we choose to organize the events as being something that is, in the long run, creating the space for us to see things differently, as opposed to something that's just beating us down into submission. We get to decide. And even if sometimes in the moment, I know I have, I feel like life has just absolutely got me in a death grip, on the floor, pinned down. Okay, I can choose to tell a different story, and I can say, no. And I can choose to say it isn't so. I can choose to deny that anything has power over my life other than love. Ernest Holmes says, we cannot only embrace ourselves, somehow our arms must find themselves around the shoulders of all humanity, so that our love is big enough. Our love is big enough to go beyond just our simple physical form. Because the whole of oneness and wholeness is greater than the sum of its parts. There is no I in team. However, someone came back and said, yeah, but there's an I in win. Well, okay, now you're going to win-lose again. Now you're creating separation. Isn't it interesting? I believe that it's human nature to want to belong. We want to feel like we are part of a group. Who wants to be left out in a schoolyard pick? We don't, because we feel less than. But when we are part of the group, then we feel that we are valued. We long to belong. And that's okay, because it is simply that impulse within us that knows that together we are stronger than any one of us is individually. The Dalai Lama says that love and compassion are necessities, not luxuries. Without them, humanity cannot survive. When we are thinking unloving thoughts, we are separating ourselves. Ernest Holmes says that love is the grandest drawing and healing power in the universe. I use that a lot too. Drawing, meaning bringing together, and healing, the greater definition, the overarching definition, is revealing the truth about who we are, and that truth is that we are one with each other, we are one with the universe, we are one with all creation. We are all made from the same stuff. We are all aspects of the one. We are interconnected at the spiritual level and also at the physical level. And that connection is life, and it is the very life that is living each one of us right here and right now. Love is the impulse of life itself. Love is the thing that connects us and binds us, that moves between us and creates a world that works for everyone. We see a world in which we live and grow as one global family that respects and honors all life and the interconnectedness of all life. Let's choose to tell that story today. Let's pray.